Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lifetime's Adoption Q&A webinar for hopeful adoptive parents. We're excited to spend some time with you and answer questions that are on your minds. No question is too big or small, and that is what it's all about tonight, is answering your questions. My name is Kim King. I'm one of the adoptive family coordinators here at Lifetime. Adoptive family coordinators, and Libby Denniston is our co-host. She is the organizer of our webinar, and I appreciate, Libby, all the work that you do behind the scenes to get these going for us. So thanks for setting all this up for us tonight.
Oh, no problem. I'm looking forward to it.
And just if you are new to webinars and new to Lifetime, this is not the only place where we will interact with our adoptive parents or new adoptive parents who are just beginning to explore. You can always reach us through our phone number, 1-800-923-6784. That is a hotline mainly for birth moms, but if you're new to Lifetime, it's fine if that's your first contact, you're not sure what to call, just call that number and we'll make sure we get you the help that you need. If you are brand new to exploring with Lifetime and have never filled out an application before, our free application is online. It's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. I know it might be a little unusual, but it is actually a free application. We don't charge anything to explore further and let you know, give you some feedback as to whether or not we can explore further and offer to assist in your adoption. So I encourage you to take that step if you have never done so before, or if you know you have an application on file but it's over a year old, it's okay to submit a new one. That's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. APPLY, and we usually have a response to applications within 5 business days. And sometimes people will say, you know, I'm at this X point in the process, like maybe I'm just starting, we're not sure what we're doing, we haven't really talked about it for very long, we're starting our research, we haven't chosen an adoption path yet. Is it too early for us to apply? And I usually explain that it's really not too early to apply because you're not obligating yourselves to anything. We're not jumping into anything just because of your application. It can move forward as quickly or as slowly as you would like, depending on where you are in your process. So don't be afraid to fill that out. And I usually also will add that our application can be really helpful to families who are new to the process because, you know, if you can sit down as a couple together and go through some of those questions, I mean, this is, you know, these are the basic questions you're going to be answering throughout the adoption process. So it's good to start answering these together while you have a chance to talk about it, really see where each of you sits as far as thoughts on adoption, what you're looking for in adoption. On our application, it also has questions for one spouse and then questions for the other. So it's a great exercise or learning tool for kind of like a self-exploration. And then we can give you feedback, especially when you have follow-up questions or just questions in general about what you're looking for. Is it promising that that could be successful, or any kinds of questions. It's helpful if we can look at everything as a whole in your file, and you would establish a file for yourself here by filling out that application on our website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. Now when you fill it out and hit submit, you will immediately or very quickly receive an automated email response. That's how you'll know it did go through. Check your spam or junk mail folder if after a few minutes you don't see an automated response. And then the following business day, when our applications coordinator actually imports your application and gets her hands on it, starts processing it, she will personally email or call you. That will not be automated. That is from a real person here at Lifetime to let you know we got it, we're working on it, and then if you want to follow up from there, of course, you're always welcome to check in on things. I mean, we have an open door policy here at Lifetime. You can call us, email us, you can fill out an inquiry form through our website at lifetimeadoption.com, or just email to info@lifetimeadoption.com. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. So hopefully that helps you get a few ways to get in touch with us and start to explore further and get to know us and let us get to know you a little bit better too if you are new to Lifetime.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. I know you were rattling off a lot of information there, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
valuable, and I know that whenever families are starting, just to start thinking about adoption, takes some courage to start exploring and figuring out what steps, and I think it is helpful to know about the application process and that there are real people behind, behind the confirmations and behind the next steps, that it's not just
Mm-hmm.
funneled through a robot system and, you know,
Right.
good luck to you if there were any typos kind of thing. That there's real people over here that are looking at these applications as a whole, that are answering your questions personally, because also we know no two families have exactly the same adoption goals. And no two adoptions are ever exactly the same. And so while we know that a lot of them have threads in common towards their success, um, there's no way for us to give a pat answer for everyone. And so that's why we love these Q&As too, is because it's an opportunity to learn about a variety of topics, but also because likely it'll spark some more questions for you to follow up as they relate more personally to your family's goals or to your situation. So, please just remember that we're happy to answer those for you one-on-one outside of webinars too. Kim, this time of year, everyone's working on their taxes, and I just want to share that we're actually working on a webinar that addresses the adoption tax credit a little bit more specifically. But, this time of year, that's something I think that is highlighted. People go through, maybe they're using an online tax application or they have a tax accountant that is processing and thinking, I've heard about adopted parents applying an adoption tax credit and how can that help me adopt sooner than later. But I thought that was kind of a good way to maybe talk just in general more about some of the ways people are funding adoption today, because for instance the adoption tax credit is not really something that will help you immediately. So you need to usually get started, and then that aspect of things comes in later. But how, when you're helping families, I would say today especially, that's one of the primary questions that come up. Adoptive parents want to invest their finances wisely. They don't want to just hire services that their adoption won't need. They are also nervous. What are my chances of this investment turning out the way that I want it to? And so a lot of people get a little nervous about, well, how do I, number one, come up with those resources, and number two, how do I know I'm putting them in the right direction? So what are some of the most common ways that people are funding adoption? Because I know the stereotype is sort of only quote rich people adopt, or only people with money, and that's just not what I see at all. I see your average American, with a job that makes their bills on time but may not have a ton extra, so how are most people today getting a foot in to start their adoption journeys?
Yes, and that's a really good observation, Libby. These families that we're working with are your average American families. Of course, some of them might be a little above average in the financial department too.
Sure.
But overall, the majority of these are just like people you run into at church, other, people, coworkers, they're just your average family. Nobody here is typically a millionaire. If they are, they haven't told us that. But yeah, I mean, that is a question that we ask on the application as far as what's your income, not because we have an income requirement or anything, but it's helpful to know sort of where people are coming from and where they may have challenges. Now, just based on an answer to what's your income and what's your bracket, that doesn't really tell us if people are going to be able to afford adoption privately, private adoption, or not, because sometimes people will select a very low income, but they've been saving for a long time, or they have really good credit and they can get the financing, or maybe they're parents or a relative are going to be funding a large part of their adoption. And people who are just starting out with their careers might not have the type of income where they've really built a big savings yet. And so those might be people who their friends and family pitch in to help pay for their adoption. So of course, donations and fundraising are a big way that people fund this. I would say that people generally patchwork together their overall adoption budget. They don't normally get it all from just one source, such as if they do fundraising. They might make good progress with that, and it might really alleviate some of the financial strain, but they still need to look at, okay, how can we save toward this over the next few months to 6 months or longer? Now, if they're not too keen on the idea of saving for a long time, which means they're going to delay their process a bit longer than they'd like, then maybe the financing options will be more appealing to them. And sometimes even people that can, pull from savings to pay for their adoption without any assistance from anyone else around them or without any financial option, like financing options, a credit card or anything, or a loan. Sometimes when they're looking at their savings, they're thinking, okay, well, I'm ready financially for adoption, but maybe I want to get a credit card that's interest-free and then get like maybe some bonus points or cash back or something and use that. So people will generally do savings, fundraising, or some sort of a credit card, loan financing, something like that. Along with that, people have sometimes options like borrowing from a 401k or doing a home equity line of credit. Sometimes people haven't even thought about that before. Not everyone is aware of whether or not their employer has adoption benefits too. And every employer that has adoption benefits handles it a little differently, like they have a process to follow. It might be that they send it directly to your adoption professional on your behalf, or maybe you pay it and then show them the receipt and they reimburse you directly. So we can look at those options together, crunch numbers together, and give you a plan to consider, such as, let's say that someone has that type of employer that's going to reimburse them. Well, they might be interested in doing our payment plan because then they can make a payment, show a receipt, and get reimbursed and use the rest toward their adoption. Use that toward the rest of their program. So there are a lot of really cool ideas you can come up with, and we can help you with that too. I think the federal adoption tax credit really helps people just have much more confidence in pulling from savings or doing a financing option because they know that they're probably going to get over $13,000 back. And the way I'm looking at the IRS writing here and the way we all understand it these days, of course, you'll always talk with a tax professional regarding your tax situation. As I like to joke, you don't get tax advice from your adoption coordinator, right? But it doesn't require you to have finalized the adoption. So that means people are getting this benefit from the tax credit for adoption a lot sooner than they were ever receiving those funds back in years prior, and maybe even able to start working on their next adoption sooner than they otherwise financially would have been able. We have a link to the most current information on the adoption tax credit on our website at lifetimeadoption.com. If you go to lifetimeadoption.com and scroll down, there you'll see a series of like rectangular buttons you can push, and there's a yellow one that says funding your adoption, and that takes you to a resources page where there's an adoption loan place called Lightstream. There's another one called Prosper. There are a couple sort of ministry-based ones that you can look into, a few grants that we link to. And then if you keep scrolling down, there's the federal adoption tax credit information. And if you click, there's a link that says visit this link on the IRS website. That'll take you right to, the horse's mouth, so to speak. So you want to go right to the IRS link. It can be really confusing to try and Google federal adoption tax credit or listen to you know, I mean, our webinar is going to be most up to date, but someone listening to it 5 years from now might be confused because the tax credit changes all the time. Now, I'll say, for the most part, it gets better for people. I've not seen it get like more challenging. So that's a good thing. And from what I understand, it was made permanent quite a few years ago, and there was really an uproar about it being taken away. So that's a good thing. But definitely talk to your tax person or someone who is very experienced with taxes who can look at your taxes, the paperwork that you have, to see what your tax liability is and see how many years it would take. I think, well, I talked with a tax person and they said they give up to 3 years to max it out. So if you didn't cap out the whole benefit the first year, don't worry, you'll have the following year and the following year after that. So I believe it's up to 3 years after. So the tax credit is huge for helping replenish savings and pay off loans or pay back parents. So
Yeah.
that's typically
And
how
I was
people
I was
go
thinking
about
we
this.
could walk through. So I pulled up the page I think you're referring to, and I kind of scrolled through. But I was just going to, if you're online or you're on the app, you'll be able to see this. So here's the homepage, lifetimeadoption.com, and then what
Libby,
I
you're a
did, I went all
genius.
the way to the bottom.
I
went
didn't
all
even
the way
think
to
of
the
that.
bottom. No, it's all right. You know, this is on the fly here. We didn't rehearse
That's
this.
great. No, not at all.
And then, like Kim said, there's this yellow box here, funding your adoption, and learn more, and they'll take you right there. So 1, 2, and you get to this information.
Yeah.
So, and if you have questions, you know, today I saw a response from a family that had inquired, and they said, you know, we just don't think that we can afford to adopt. Please stop contacting us. And Kim, you and I were talking about how it doesn't always have to be that, you know, that cut and dry. That I get before you decide, no, this is not the right option for me. Because here's the reality: whether you go with Lifetime or another domestic adoption program, if you want to adopt a newborn in the U.S. And do a private adoption or an agency adoption with a birth mother who's not involved with foster care, there's going to be fees involved because there's a lot of wheels turning and it's not government funded.
Right.
So you're going to be paying for people who are experienced professionals that can help bring your baby home. But every program's different. So even if it's not Lifetime, you still need to know that there are options out there and that most people who adopt today are not doing so because they've been saving for the last 10 years in preparation for this, or that they sold some massive extra home that they've got a big savings resulting from, or something like that. So it's okay to just bring up any of those concerns when you reach out to us and say, you know, here's my biggest hurdle or my biggest concern or worry, and how do other families get over that or cross that bridge, or what solutions are there? And then if you still find out, well, you know, this is going to be a lot tougher than I think it's going to be, you know, maybe it means you wait another year because you need to explore some options like reducing some debt so that you can have some wiggle room in saving more, or clear up some credit so that you do have the ability to put some of those fees on that kind of plan. But then for some of you, you might hit that and go, you know what, this just isn't possible right now. We're going to have to evaluate some lower cost options like maybe foster care, and that's okay. There's still really beautiful stories that come out of that path. But before you just decide for yourself whether you're able to or not, it's helpful just to talk about it, because none of us are judging you. I'll tell you right now, none of us are going to be surprised at the struggle that it might feel looking ahead. And you know, as I would say too, because a lot of people also share a general concern for, you know, maybe someone said, I know you want to adopt, and I would love to help you reach that goal, and maybe they gifted you with a large sum of money that's allowing you to start this journey, and then you're thinking, this is the only way we're able to get on this path to adopt, and I want to make sure that this friend who blessed us is also not disappointed with how we invested their gift. So just talk with us. That's all I can say. There's just so many more answers to that. But I'm glad we could talk about it a little, because I know money's always awkward to talk about, but it's reality.
Yeah, it's the reality. It's kind of like the elephant. People feel like it's the elephant in the room. Like they want to talk, they know that we are here to help them with learning how to go about adoption and sharing what we can do. But they might feel anxious about even talking about the financial part. Like sometimes people even comment, I don't want it to seem like I'm all about the money, but I need to have these questions answered. And I'm like, totally fine. Look, the financial aspect is a part of it. We are very well aware of that, and we appreciate having jobs to go to. We're passionate about what we're doing, but we couldn't do it for free, and there's a lot that goes into our program and the services that we offer. We know how valuable the support is to the birth moms that are coming through, and that's all funded by the adoptive parents who are paying for their adoption services. So, don't be shy about asking your questions or sharing obstacles or options you're considering.
You brought to mind an interaction I was actually having with a woman who was thinking about placing her baby for adoption. Earlier this week, she reached out and said, I don't like the idea of somebody having to pay fees to adopt my baby. And she didn't want to feel like she was selling a baby. It was really, it was really pressing on her that she's pregnant, she really wants to make an adoption plan, but that she's heard these things, as most of you have, about what adoption takes these days. And so just know that sometimes this conversation also comes up on the other side of the story, that these women who are choosing you to adopt their babies, they also don't want you to, break the bank just to adopt, that they want it to be a fair process, so that there's never this seedy kind of odd feeling around the adoption. But when we explain to her, okay, no, you pay doctors for their services and things like that, then she understands, okay, I've heard things, and I just want to make sure that nobody knows that I'm doing this for money.
Right.
So just know that that topic comes up across the board, and that we're happy to answer any questions about that. So speaking about birth moms, there was a really great question here that says, how do you screen potential birth moms to know that she is genuine? Well, Kim, let's start with you, and then I'll tackle on, because I probably have some stories.
Yeah, you definitely do, with all your hours you've logged over the years for our on-call support, not to mention just taking the normal calls during the day. I do work more on the adoptive parent side, more with the adoptive parents that are exploring, and maybe some aren't even sure what goes on the birth mom side because they're so new to adoption. We provide 24/7 support for the birth mom from first contact on into the future. And we really want to get to know her as much as she allows us to. And we let them know it's never too early or too late to plan adoption. Typically, someone who is not on the up and up is not going to be reaching out to an organization like Lifetime, where we are established and we have steps for her to follow. Now, granted, we're not trying to put down any barriers for women to consider or plan adoption, but we have some basic steps in place, some basic things to verify that this is a pregnancy, what's the due date, and as she is going through the steps of our program, so that we can learn as much as we can and have all that information for the adoptive parents and everything. Typically, someone will put on the brakes and just drop off the face of the planet. If they're not legitimate, they won't be able to produce a proof of pregnancy. Or maybe they won't want us contacting their doctor's office at all, even if they are legitimately pregnant, because what's that going to look like if she's not interested in adoption, she's just scamming, and then an adoption professional starts contacting her doctor's office to get medical records and to get approved. There's a lot that goes on that a woman who's not sincere is not really going to be comfortable with. We also ask a little bit more about what they expect out of adoption. I would say sometimes there can be red flags if they're making demands from the get-go and refusing to return the documents that we need. So there is a process that is pretty tried and true over these last more than 30 years, and our coordinators will all kind of cross-reference their experiences in reviewing information with a birth mom or prospective birth mom to put their heads together. So you're not just relying on the screening experience of one coordinator or her couple of years at Lifetime. You are also benefiting from the team, their combined experience. And some of our people have been here over 10 years working with birth moms every day. So that would be just kind of like an overall view. Most birth moms aren't scamming. That's just not something we see a lot. It's not that we never see it. Typically, it never gets to the point of where you're talking to her. But Libby, what's your insight? What's your experience?
Well, I think it's that word genuine that I'm looking at. How do you know she's genuine? And I'll tell you a little story from last weekend. So I was on call, and I have to say, I mean, we have a 24-hour hotline, but the later the night gets, sometimes the more skeptical we get about genuine callers. Sometimes you can imagine what that might mean, but sometimes we get some real oddballs calling, sometimes even some creepers that just like playing around. And our on-call staff, we try and be as patient as we can, filtering through these and trying to determine, you know, is this just a person who has kind of an odd sense of humor, or is this a person who's playing games and just wants to prank call or be gross? Because sometimes people are gross and offensive on any kind of hotline. But I took a call. It wasn't very late, but, you know, it was, gosh, I think it was Monday night. It was after hours, and honestly, speaking with this young woman, she had a very deep, hoarse voice. And I was thinking, is this just a guy playing around? Because sometimes, like I said, we've heard it all. But we spoke. We actually got accidentally disconnected, and she called right back. And we took some information, and you know, the reality is when a woman wants to learn about adoption, we do everything that we can just to reassure her that making that phone call is not obligating her to choosing adoption, that just because we speak for 20 minutes in your evening or during the day doesn't mean that we're assuming by the end of the week you're going to have an adoption plan in place and, yeah, I'm 110% in, let's do this. Because it's such an important lifelong decision that Lifetime does everything possible not to pressure these women. So education is key, not only for adoptive parents, but also for women who are considering adoption. But just talking with this woman, you know, we ran through the same questions that we do with anyone, asking even just how long have you been thinking about adoption? And a lot of them have kind of a common story where maybe they've been thinking about adoption a lot longer than it took to even look up the information and make a phone call. So they might say, well, weeks or months that they've been thinking about it. Sometimes they share in common that they had a breakup with the baby's father when they expected him to be there, and now he's left, or maybe he got another woman pregnant, or he's just totally uninterested, uninvolved, and they're not together anymore, and she's wondering, I could barely make this work when I could count on his help, and now he's saying, I don't want anything to do with you or the baby. You know, so they're often going through a lot more than just learning about adoption. So we try and just hear them out and really be a listening ear, because the reality is a lot of these women may also not, they may not have the kind of support systems that you and I have. And when they even just get a caring voice on the phone for 25 minutes, they might cry a little, they might laugh a little, they might breathe a sigh of relief or ask questions. You know, it's so humbling and such a blessing to me when I wrap up a short phone call with a woman and she'll say, thank you, I feel so much better. And that doesn't mean that she's chosen adoption for sure, but it just means that now she knows she has some options, that she is not as trapped or desperate as she feels, or that it seemed before she called. That now she's voiced questions and put words to feelings, um, and then I will tell all of you, because I know that you would long to talk with a birth mother about her baby. Um, Sometimes the deciding factor and finding out that is she genuinely interested in adoption, sometimes that moment comes when she sees your adoption profile. So whether that's by mail, or she got it in an email, or she saw your website online, or she saw you featured on one of our social media outlets, um, whatever that is, sometimes clicking with the people that she could really see adopting her baby is the reason she chooses adoption. So, we do everything we can to really be a support so that they're not feeling pressured, which would only lead to a greater chance that at the last minute they would kind of panic and change their minds. So, as part of screening these women, we're also looking for consistency in the story. So when I talk to her over the course of a few weeks or a few days even, uh, are there missing pieces of the story that make me question if she's being truthful, or if there's something more to this that is not coming out, sometimes following through, like Kim said, we require a proof of pregnancy. And that is not mailing us her positive pregnancy test she took at home in her bathroom. That is from a doctor, usually an ultrasound photo confirming the pregnancy. And it's kind of a step-by-step thing. When you want help from someone, you're willing to complete the steps that they have asked you to complete to get their help. And then if you don't really want that help, then you're not going to do it. So that's kind of how we get to that. When we start a match, we call adoptive parents after we've already sort of had a chance to get to know a potential birth mother. She's sent us a proof of pregnancy, even completed a little bit more paperwork to help us learn about her baby, but also her own adoption goals and visions. And then we're calling you and presenting you with every bit of information that we've learned about her, including she's really funny, so don't be caught off guard if she laughs a lot, because she is taking this seriously. Or it might be something like, she's very quiet and shy, so if it feels a little awkward, just know that that's how I felt talking to her too, but she's just really shy. So sometimes we're even sharing the little details about what we've learned about her, just so that you can get a better idea of how to communicate too. So I feel like we kind of, I feel like it's a big nutshell. Really, again, going back to how we started tonight, no two birth moms are the same. And so while we have the same process for them to move through, we also know that they're all in different stages of thinking about or choosing adoption, and that we never assume that one woman is like the next. So we really try and meet her needs the way that she is able to process them at the time and to communicate them with us, so that she feels supported, so that she knows that this is not just all about the baby, but that it's as much about, we care about her and the decisions she's making for the long term for her and her baby. So I hope that helps to answer that. I feel like that's its own webinar we could probably go into. Let's see, here is a question about older child adoptions. This is a great question. Thank you, Deandra. At Lifetime, can you adopt children as old as 3 or 4? Kind of the short answer there is yes. More often we're working with women who are pregnant. Most of our adoptions are of healthy newborns. But we have seen, because it's truly never too late for adoption, we have seen older child adoptions, and what we mean by that is baby's already born. So that could even be a 6-week-old or a 1-year-old or a 4-year-old. And that's something that's important to emphasize when you do apply and you get to that section about preferences and what you're looking for, that you communicate if you would be open to a toddler or an older child. In addition to a newborn, that's just as important, because not everyone is, and we do get those calls from time to time. Kim, do you want to add anything to that about older child adoptions?
Sure. I mean, most of our adoptions are newborn, so typically a family that can expect to be successful here at Lifetime is at least open to a newborn, unless they're on the total other end of the spectrum and they're not even wanting anyone under 5 years old. Then they might, we might have a different consideration for them because it's harder to find families that are actively seeking someone 5 and older in private adoption. But for most of our families, they're hoping for an infant. I would say a lot of people are looking for toddlers these days, but toddler adoptions are not as common, and most people are okay with a 2 or 3-year-old. I mean, I would say the majority of our families are open from newborn to 3 months, 6 months, maybe even up to 12 months. And then there are probably a portion that are open up to 2, 3, 4 years old. It becomes a challenge if a child is 5 or older. There aren't as many families in our program who are open. We're usually able to find a match, though. I mean, we don't just leave someone without and say, sorry, we can't help you. We always can do our best to go to our added layers of people who might be open, or send an email out to all of our families saying we have this case, nobody readily matches. If anyone is interested, this is just, an email we're sending everyone. If you're interested, it might be outside the preferences, but let us know. I mean, that's how we can go to all our families first before networking beyond our Lifetime families, to at least give our contracted families the opportunity to know about the need that there is. And I think most of our families appreciate that. But about 95 to 97% of our adoptions are newborn. So if someone is really looking for the exception to what we see, we may not be the best fit. But we do see a few toddler adoptions a year. But those families were also open to a newborn, since the classic case we have here is like Libby's describing, a pregnant woman who's considering her options.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with siblings, I would say. Sometimes when she's learning.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, maybe a few times a year, not the majority. If someone's only looking for siblings, we're probably not the right fit for them. You'd be better off only seeking siblings through international or foster, but I know that's not your frame of mind, the person who's asking the question about siblings. You'd be open to a single as well, of course. So yeah, I mean, maybe a few times a year, but be sure, you guys, when you're reviewing your preferences, when you're setting up your preferences for those who are new to Lifetime, be sure to include every scenario you would say yes to. Don't leave out anything just because you think, oh, it's probably not going to happen, it's not as common. I mean, I'll just put a no on it since it's not likely. Well, don't make that decision for that birth mom. If you would say yes to her, let her view you and give her that opportunity to choose you. It could lead to that successful adoption, even though it might be something that fits into more of the exception than the norm. Like sometimes people will say, well, we're open to Asian, but it's probably not going to happen, so we'll just put a no on it. Well, I mean, we do see Asian maybe a few times a year. Most of our adoptions will probably fall under the Caucasian, Hispanic, or African American, or combinations of those type of category. But every now and then, and I think now more than before, we're seeing the older ones, the multiples, and the Asian cases, whereas before it was like maybe once a year. I think these are all areas where we're starting to see a little more. I think that's just a result of the adoption conversation getting louder in our country, that more people are becoming aware, and that is so wonderful to see, that when someone's considering their options, adoption is more likely to be something they consider.
Yeah, well, and that's the truth, that it's happened several times where a woman who's pregnant will call, learn about adoption, and then when she realizes what it could be like, and that she reflects on how much she's been struggling with, say, having a 3-year-old already, and now she's pregnant again, there have been times when women have said, I really was thinking about adoption just for this newborn, but now that I've gotten to know what it could be like, I'm thinking that maybe I need to place both my children in the same home. And so you really don't always know. There's so many different reasons women consider adoption, but sometimes, sometimes that sibling opportunity comes, and it's it's such a passion of ours to make sure that women know it's never too late for adoption. 17 might be a bit late.
But, there have been 17-year-olds that are adopted and are so grateful, like in the foster system. They're grateful to have a family to call home,
Right.
Yeah.
But a birth mother,
typically not a birth mom placing a 17-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So good question, though. And there was some follow-up questions about that, like what books would you recommend, or like about adoption of a toddler versus a newborn, or any specific websites about one versus the other. And it's hard for me to answer those because, well, number one, Lifetime has a lot of resources just on our own website and on our blog, and through the webinars too. There's different stories that were of older child adoption versus, and then lots of newborn adoption stories. But what I will say is that, in particular, with older child adoptions, whether that's an 8-month-old or a 2-year-old or a sibling group, your home study provider will often have extra follow-up and extra resources for adoptive parents who complete adoptions of a child older than newborn, because they understand that there's usually an adjustment time. There may have been even even if it's not an abuse issue, sometimes it's just, when a woman is working, say, 2 jobs to try and make ends meet, or maybe she's moving from couch to couch because she can't have a job because she can't afford daycare, so she keeps sleeping on friends' couches, and say a young baby or a toddler is not in a stable home all the time. But there just may even be some little issues that your home study provider can help that child adapt to their new stability, to the new parents, to the new life. So just keep that in mind. I've worked on a few older child adoptions, and in those cases, the home study sort of shined even brighter, if that makes sense. Don't underestimate that resource. So when you are pursuing adoption, the people coordinating your adoption aren't your only resource, that you have a home study provider that has not only gotten to know you, but that has, they're going into the homes, they're seeing the children after these adoptions take place. Not that we don't stay involved or want to hear from you after, but your home study offers a different role and a different experience. So that is a good resource too to lean on, while you're considering things. But also just remember, like we were saying, no 2 adoptions are the same. So even 2 different newborn adoptions might require different books or different resources. It's just different.
Speaking of the home study provider's role, she's going to be a social worker who, like Libby said, helps you get everything set up to be able to complete that home study. She's going to go through all the scenarios of what you're open to, because she has to write in your home study what type of adoption you're approved for, like up to how many children, up to what age, what race. She's going to say if you're approved for all those things in your home study. Typically, families have no problem getting approved for the things they're open to in their adoption, unless they live in a really tiny place and maybe can only get approved for one or something like that. But the home study provider will be a great resource for you as you explore what you're setting up in your home study. And also, like Libby was saying, coming out after the adoption or before it's finalized. So what that is those are post-placement visits. So after you've gotten everything set up, you have your home study done, you're being presented to birth moms, you have a match, you go through, you adopt that child, and you come home and you go through all that, paperwork and everything, but your adoption isn't finalized yet. The home study provider comes out again. You can hire them for your post-placement visits, and every state requires at least 2 post-placement visits. Now, for newborn adoptions, it's typically, more of a formality in private newborn adoptions. But these are social workers, like Libby said, who have had all kinds of experiences viewing families after the adoption, and they can give you tips and pointers.
It's usually pleasurable. I've heard from social workers too that say, I'm not showing up to look in your fridge and criticize the fact that you've been working on 3 hours of sleep every night and you've just had pizza because that's all you can muster. You know, she's not coming in to shake a finger at you. They're coming
Right.
in to help you, and that they look forward to it too because they worked with you on this front end when you were longing for that child, and then it's so rewarding for them to see you now um, in life with a child. And I've heard funny little stories about, I've heard many of these caseworkers talk about how fun it is to see, you know, when you haven't yet adopted, your house is all picked up, everything's in a perfect place, but then they do a post-placement visit and there's laundry on the couch and socks on the floor and, you know, dish rags aren't folded, they're just on the counter. So dishes in the sink, you know, so she's not coming over to be like, you know, a really stern mother-in-law who just wants to nitpick everything you do.
Mhm.
They're coming over to be a support and a help, and to
Yeah.
really help you pave the way towards, you know, formally finalizing that adoption. So
Mhm.
great. I wanted to kind of keep going. There was a question here about percentage of drug users, percentage of birth mothers with drug or alcohol exposure during the pregnancy.
Mhm.
Like we said, most of our adoptions are of healthy newborns, but time to time, one of the reasons that women choose adoption is because they can't stay sober. I will share, heavy alcohol use is pretty uncommon within our doors because a lot of times the women who are really just serious alcoholics, struggling alcoholics, a lot of times I don't think that they have the frame of mind to make an adoption plan ahead of time, so we don't get a lot of
Mhm.
calls from those women. Those
Right.
babies are probably usually taken by CPS, by family services at the hospital at birth, so a lot of times it's just more, we just don't see it as much. We have worked with those women. It's been a long time since I heard a story like that, um, but it's not as common as a woman who may have smoked some pot or, you know, sometimes, like recently, we worked with a couple adoptions that involved opiates or meth, and, you know, it happens. I don't have a percentage number, though, because I feel like it kind of varies. It's like we'll get a couple at a time and then not have any for 6 months, you know, so, um,
Mhm.
but it is worth educating yourself about and deciding, would I be open to that? Because a lot of adoptive parents are surprised to find out that the risks and side effects are not quite what they've heard through the grapevine. But
Mhm.
then for some families, you know, you may realize that actually, yeah, that's a little bit more than I feel comfortable with, so I'm not open to that. My my answer to that is always, number one, get actual expert advice, but then also remember that these babies, they vary. So some of them may have a health constitution that doesn't show any side effects, while another may have a lot of side effects and things to overcome. And that a lot of the studies I will share, just from my own observations, Kim, I know you and I have talked about this before, a lot of the studies out there about prenatal drug exposure and the effects on a baby, toddler, and school-age child, they, I have noticed that they don't take into account when that child is raised at birth by an adoptive parent who's stable and not a drug user.
Mhm.
So a lot of times these studies I read and I just question, well, is this a child that was raised by a recovering addict or by a family of an addict? Or
Mhm.
was this a child that was never ever exposed outside of the uterus to
Mhm.
any behavior involving drug use, and that they still have these? So just kind of take it into consideration, but get some medical advice. Um, and just, I would also say, just sort of pray and see what peace comes over your heart, because you can't get all the information, you can't get all the answers, and drug use, drug exposure during pregnancy, I think that's one of the hardest hurdles, because especially when you've gone through infertility or when you're facing the reality of, well, if I were to give birth, I certainly do not use drugs, so my child would not be exposed to drugs. I wouldn't even have that risk in play. I know that that's sort of a journey in itself, just realizing that you don't get control over that pregnancy, but that there are other elements
Yeah.
that can come into play that could counteract effects during a pregnancy. But on average, most of the women who call us haven't even ever smoked a cigarette during that pregnancy. I would say the most common thing I hear when I talk with these women, because that's part of our initial conversation too, is to tell me about your pregnancy health. Have you smoked cigarettes? Have you had any alcohol during this pregnancy? And the most common is probably, well, I might have had a beer before I found out. I can't really remember. So it's sort of your average, could happen to any woman who finds herself pregnant without trying to become pregnant. That she may have had a margarita and then, a couple weeks later found out she's pregnant, so it's usually very minimal or zero. It's pretty common actually that I hear women that just say, no, I haven't used anything. So yeah,
Even though heavy drug use or, I mean, we really haven't had a lot of experience with heavy alcohol use, but it's more like if there's heavy usage, it's drugs. Talk with a pediatrician, do the research. Don't say no just because it's not likely or common and you feel like you won't miss out on anything. You might miss out on the one that would have chosen you, in God's perfect timing, that child that was meant for you. Do the research, do the praying. By research, probably just talk to a pediatrician. Talk to someone who works with children because they have so much experience, training, knowledge. It's a lot easier to just have a conversation with someone who sees the realities, the day-to-day of life of these children after birth versus trying to research on like WebMD. That can be so scary. I mean, you get a pimple on your arm and you look on WebMD and it tells you like 20 million things that could be totally scary, freak you out. Same thing with trying to research substance exposure. I mean, in the general public in the U.S., nobody wants people using substances, so of course they're going to say the scariest things, right? And there are those extreme scary cases, but talk with a pediatrician because they're going to be, they're going to give you reasonable input. And then, pray about it and see where your heart feels at peace. I would say the more people do their research or the more exposure they've had, like let's say they're a NICU nurse themselves, usually the more open they are, which is so interesting, right? Because if it was such a horrible, scary thing, they'd be the ones that would be close to it. So if it's the opposite, what are all the rest of us who are just lay people, not medical professionals, haven't had this research and exposure, who, why are we so afraid of it? Well, get the info. Don't make a decision just out of fear or urban myth or, neighborhood myth or rural myth either.
Anything adoption related, don't make a decision based on some urban legend or rumor or outdated myth that you heard. It's so wise to just say, is this true? Is this really like this? Speaking of which, I really wanted to make sure that we touched on two questions I saw that I think we can kind of piggyback. One of them was, what's the earliest in the pregnancy you have seen an expectant mother match with an adoptive couple? And do the early matches more often end with her deciding to parent? And then another question was, in my state, there's 30 days for the birth mother to change her mind, and it scares me. Can you talk about states that have long revocation periods? But what I would rather talk about is that those two questions have in common are the risk of a birth mom changing her mind. And the reality is, it's kind of like when I was talking earlier about how when a woman's researching adoption, we're not pressuring her. We don't expect that just because she picked up the phone and called that she is all on board and ready to start things. It's really at her pace. And because we give her that freedom, and also because we are not forcing her to choose one family or another, she truly gets a choice. I mean, some of you might look at Lifetime's site and say, wow, there's a lot of families working with Lifetime. But you know what that does? That actually means that you're more likely to complete an adoption because a woman didn't choose you out of a lack of options. So when she chooses you because she feels like this is the most awesome fit for my baby, she's going to have a greater confidence that she actually had every say in what happened and that she didn't feel pressured or forced or sort of last resort about it. Now, the earliest that I've seen women match might be around 12 weeks. We usually ask women to make sure that they're well into their second trimester before they confirm a match, but there have been times when a woman might be 10 or 12 weeks along and the doctor has confirmed that this pregnancy is healthy, there's no reason to believe a miscarriage is at risk, and that she might want to get to know adoptive families, but we usually would encourage the family and the birth mother, potential birth mother, to wait until she's around 16 to 20 weeks to really confirm that match officially. So to not retain an attorney at 12 weeks along, that she's, it's really more of just an exploratory time. But I've seen it go both ways. I've seen women who call at the last minute change their mind 2 days later. I've also seen women that we've been working with for 6 months that you think, gosh, she's really got an amazing relationship with these adoptive parents that she chose. And then at the last minute, she just has a change of heart. I mean, you can't control that. That's why in today's adoption, women do not sign their parental rights over until after that baby's born, and that is because sometimes things just change when that baby comes. And we know that that can be hard for adoptive parents, but there were some laws in the old days that would allow women to be pregnant and then sign their rights over, and those are often the stories you hear of birth mothers talking about how horrible adoption is, that they felt so forced into it because here this baby comes and then they've already signed their parental rights away. They don't even get an opportunity to say, wait a second, let me make sure that I really want this or that I don't need more time to say goodbye. They want to have a say. But when it comes to, that's what I love about open adoption, honestly, and this is where I kind of wanted to go with that 30-day revocation period. Not to mention that in some states there may be a 30-day for you, but if your birth mother lives in a state that has more favorable adoption laws, sometimes you can use her state laws and then finalize in that state, and it's not really that complicated. But that's kind of a whole other discussion of all the ways that that could go. So just know that it's not always just cut and dry based on what you may have read on the internet, that it can be really match to match what works for the best interest of the specific people in the match that's coming together. But Kim, what I love about open adoption is truly that because a woman gets a say in who adopts her baby and how things go at the hospital, and then knows that she is choosing people who are sincere about not just taking the baby and running, that they're not just using her for this baby, that really they care about what happens to her and that they would be interested in sharing updates in the future and letting her know how her baby's growing, how the family she helped to create is doing. Those are the women who are more likely to, once they decide to start an adoption plan, they're more likely to follow through with it because they've had the time, they've had the space to really choose how they want this to look. Nobody is saying, hey, tapping your finger or your foot going, when are you going to make a decision? No, it's totally up to her. And when she can talk to you and get to know you, when you are sincere and she builds a trust level with you that you're not just going to cut her out, basically you lie just to get what you want and then cut her out. When she can trust that you actually care about what you've committed to with each other, it's common for a lot of women to be happy for you, to be excited for you, to have this opportunity, and that they have sort of an inner pride. They're proud of this opportunity that they're giving a family, but that they're also giving their baby. So even if there's a 30-day period in which to change her mind, it doesn't necessarily increase your chance that she's going to change her mind compared to a state where she might only have 2 days to change her mind. So I don't want those numbers to be scary, but I do know that that's a real risk. And all I can say after all these many years, Kim and I have been doing this about as long, Kim a little longer than me, but a long time. And we've seen it go all different ways. And we know how hard it is for expectant adoptive parents, for hopeful adoptive parents, that you have been waiting and doing everything you can to get to this baby. And then you go through that disappointment. All I can say is that that disappointment is real, but perspective helps, because you should know that birth moms don't change their mind because they want to torture you. That it's often very, very hard for these women to actually say, you know, I can't do this, I can't go forward with it, because she also knows that you're going to be really disappointed, that you're going to grieve that. The loss of the dream you already started to create with her baby. But I read a really amazing testimony today. It was in a Facebook group I follow, and it was just so beautiful, such a perfect testimony to what we see happen. And at Lifetime, we have a bit of a lower rate of women changing their mind, and I think that that's really because of the way that we are able to sort of be a good and thorough support to her, but on her terms, so that she's not pressured, so that she's not feeling forced one way or another. So we actually have a lower rate of women changing their minds than other places, but it still happens in our program. But I read a beautiful story today, and it was an adoptive couple that went through infertility for, I think, about a decade. Then they went through 3 failed adoptions, and then they became matched with their son's birth mom. And they said, you know, every time we had the disappointment, we would just wonder, why are we being led through this pain every time? You know, are we even meant to be parents? Are we even on the right track? And then they said, because this little angel wasn't born yet, wasn't ready for us, and this little angel was meant for our family. And it's those stories that remind us all that when it's right, and you'll look back and you'll probably remember, if you ever go through a failed adoption, it's not something you'll likely forget, but you'll also have that perspective of, if you had adopted that child, you may not have gotten to know the child that you have come to celebrate 5 birthdays with, and that has a sweet nickname for your mom and loves to do baking like you do, you know. So sometimes it's just a matter of perspective, but also that is part of what Lifetime is doing when we're walking families and birth parents through matches. We're not just saying, oh, great, you're matched, congratulations, let us know how it goes. We are moving through that with you, and that when she is saying, I'm not sure I can go through with this, that we are also asking her questions like, what has changed? You know, what's your plan now? Because we want her to have a plan. We don't just want her to be living on ups and downs of emotions all the time. We want to encourage her to have a healthy plan for her and her baby, whether that's adoption or she's going home with that baby herself. And sometimes it is that the plans changed. Maybe the baby's father came back and she trusts him to stay on board now. Or maybe her mom stepped in and said, I had no idea that things were going this hard for you. You can move back home. Let's make this work. Sometimes things like that happen, but other times it's just they just didn't realize the feelings that would sweep over them, and that they had a change of heart. But on the same note, I just want to add too that if you do end up in a match and she is emotional or crying, don't take that as if she's changing her mind until she tells you she's changing her mind, because it's a real process that these women go through, and you can't undermine it. You can't say, oh, you're so emotional about it, it's over, we're done, we're not going to get to adopt this baby. No, let her process her feelings, keep open communication, and be there as much for her as you are for the baby. That's what I love about all these adoption stories we've heard, Kim, is on our webinars, is how often they just talk about, when we were at the hospital, we spent time with her. It wasn't all about how can we get in a private little corner with this baby, just us. It was about spending time with her and making the most of that time, because that's time you can't get back. And how precious is that time to your baby's story, that when they're 5, 6, 15 years old, you'll be able to talk about, oh, I remember us sitting there with her, and you have blonde curly hair just like she did, and and it's part of you now. So I would say don't be scared, but also we like the term cautiously optimistic. And Marty will often say, Marty, founder of Lifetime, will often say, hold a little piece of your heart back until you know for sure that's your child. But we know that that's hard too, which is another reason why all of our programs here, you're coming to us to say, does this sound like something I should pursue? What should I do next? And that you're not feeling like you have to have all the answers, but you're getting some support and direction. Sometimes that's even, Kim, kind of like good friends. When you have, say, a circle of 3 friends, you and I might have a conversation and maybe it gets a little heated, and you're thinking, gosh, that is not at all what my relationship with Libby has been like. And then maybe you go to that 3rd friend and say, has she said anything to you about what's going on? So that you're keeping Lifetime in the loop in the same way, because maybe something came up and it was just a bad day or an off day, or, things happen. So again, it's about relationship to me. That's what I see in adoption today. It's relationship. And when you come to care about that woman that's chosen you for her child, and if she changes her mind, there may be a part of you that actually understands why she did, because you've taken time to get to know her. And you'll still grieve that, but it won't be as kind of simple and TV-like to just say, oh, my heart ripped apart because you changed your mind. I bet that most families who go through failed adoption have very mixed feelings, because it's so disappointing, but also they know what a difficult decision it is for a woman to actually complete an adoption. So don't be surprised at the mix of feelings that will come up as you all pursue step by step this path through adoption. But it's all beautiful, and as we heard on last week's adoption story, it is all worth it too.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. No matter which direction that match goes in, you're going to have mixed feelings, especially because you will find yourself caring so much more about her than you could have ever imagined. Sometimes people who are first exploring adoption really don't expect themselves to grow a connection with birth mom, or to, they might feel a little more skeptical, but the reality of going through that together, you can't help but grow a care and concern for her and a wanting of the best for her. In addition to, you're going to be adopting. Your adoption plans aren't based on this one specific woman and her one choice for this one baby. At Lifetime, we know we're ready to start presenting you to new birth moms if that should happen to you. So you're not just on your own. You're not starting from scratch, starting a whole new thing. We're resuming adoption pursuit as soon as you say you are ready. And that might take a few days. It might take a few weeks for some families. But that communication and that support is here. So that you can continue pursuing your dream as soon as you say you are ready. So I think that is also good peace of mind to just keep in your back pocket. And I can't imagine any family here at Lifetime wanting to adopt from a woman who's unwilling. If she's healthy and she's making her best choices, it's not a foster care situation. It's something totally different where it would have been voluntary. Can't imagine people saying, well, I don't care how you feel. This is my baby. I just can't imagine any of our families, feeling, saying anything like that. But, we're here for you guys. These have all been great questions. So many questions have gone unanswered. If you have questions that have gone unanswered and you have a coordinator here at Lifetime, I encourage you to email that over to her right now. She can answer that for you. If you don't have a coordinator here at Lifetime, you can email me, kim@lifetimeadoption.com. If you email me that right away, I can answer that for you this evening. kim@lifetimeadoption.com if you don't have a coordinator, or if I'm your coordinator, definitely email me your question.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. And I was typing your email back to a few people here, just trying to get them in the right direction. But I do want to thank all of you for being with us tonight, and just encourage you to to keep up with the questions. We are happy to answer them for you one-on-one, whether you're already working with Lifetime or maybe you would be making contact for the first time. Education is key when it comes to adopting safe and successfully in today's world, so please don't ever think that a question is off base or dumb or that you should know something already, because even if you've already adopted before, like I said, every adoption is different and you can't be expected to know all the answers. And what I love about Lifetime's team is that even, let's say you called me and I don't know the answer to your question, I will go to someone who does. And if Lifetime doesn't know the answer, we know other people who do. So we will try and point you in the best direction possible so that you have clarity as you pursue this path. So really just keep in touch. Let us know how we can help. But also, we're going live on Facebook tomorrow. So if you follow our page on Facebook, you can go to Lifetime Adoption Center, or like Kim said earlier, it's facebook.com/open.adoption. But we will go live at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So if you follow our page, you hopefully will see that notification pop up, and you can tune in and get a little sneak at the faces behind some of the voices that you may talk to at Lifetime, and maybe even see a little bit of inside the office and some buzz in the background behind the scenes. So we hope to answer a lot more questions on that tomorrow too. But I just want to thank all of you for being here. And I know that many of you are in different phases of adopting, and it sounds so simple, but just if this is on your heart and it's not going away, the desire's not decreasing, and that you don't have peace about pursuing any other direction, then just keep going. Keep uncovering one prayer after another, one step after another, and get the support that you need. Maybe that's not through your adoption coordinator, but maybe it's just finally opening up to a friend about how hard things have been, just trying to get on this path, or talking with a counselor even, or a pastor, or just simply just allowing yourself time to go through the emotions that are involved with choosing an adoption path. It's not an easy path, but it doesn't have to be a very complicated path. And all I ever hear from Lifetime families is that it was worth every tear, every home study visit, every bit of paperwork. It was every frustration as they tried to tie their profiles together, every time and effort and resource that they put into this journey, that when you hold that baby in your arms at last, I've never, ever, ever had a family say, yeah, it was all right. So please, please just trust the path you're on. And remember, too, you can go to adoptionwebinar.com, or if you're already working with us, look in the membership site, because you have access to even more webinars than are listed on our public site. And really revisit some of the adoption stories. I think those are some of the most encouraging and validating resources available, is to hear from other people who have been where you are today. So wherever you are today in this process, just know that there have been others that we have helped in the exact same shoes that you're wearing today, and that we look forward to seeing what's ahead in your story. So Kim, is there anything you want to add before we close out?
No, I think you've covered it, and we appreciate you all spending time with us this evening, and we look forward to coming together again on our next webinar. So stay tuned to your emails so that you can get that invite and join us on the Facebook Live tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk with you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.